there are groups of people who dedicated their entire lives to trying to save these animals, trying to conserve them. And one of the problems they come across is that it's all very well just to protect them from predators, which is very, very, very hard to do. But the next problem they come across is the mating habits of the kakapo. Because it turns out that the mating habits of the kakapo are incredibly long drawn out, fantastically complicated, and almost entirely ineffective. Some people will tell you that the mating call of the male kakapo actively repels the female kakapo, which is the sort of behavior you otherwise only find really in discotheques. The people who've heard the mating call of the male kakapo will tell you you can hardly even hear it. It's like a sort of... I'll tell you what they do. This animal, for about 100 nights of the year, it goes through its mating ritual. And what it does is it finds some great rocky outcrop looking out over the great rolling valleys of New Zealand, because acoustics are very important to what's about to happen. And it burrows out this kind of, carves out this kind of bowl that it sits in. And it sits there, and it puffs out this great sort of air sacs around its chest. And it sits there, and these are reverberation chambers. This is a kind of reverberation chamber. And it sits there, and for night after night after night, for 100 nights of the year, for 8 hours of the night, it performs the opening bars of Dark Side of the Moon. Now, I see some grey hairs here, so you'll know the album I'm referring to, which, as you remember, starts with this great sort of boom, boom, boom. So it's a heartbeat. It's a heartbeat sound. And this is the noise that the kakapo makes. But it's so deep that you more kind of feel it like a wobble in the pit of your stomach. You can only just sort of tune your hearing into it. Now, I never managed to get to hear it. But those who do feel that it's a very eerie sound, because you don't really hear it, you more kind of feel it. And it's bass sound. It's very, very deep bass sound, just below the level of our hearing. Now, it turns out that bass sound has two important characteristics to it, one of which is that these great long waves, these great long sound waves, travel great distances, and they fill these great valleys of the South Island in New Zealand. And that's good. That's good. But there is another characteristic of bass sound, which you may be familiar with if you've got those kind of, the kind of sort of stereo speakers you can get, where you have two tiny little ones that give you a treble sound. And you have to put them very carefully in the room, because they're going to define the stereo image. And then you have what's known as a subwoofer, which is the bass box. And that's going to produce just the bass sound. And you can put that anywhere in the room you like. You can put it behind the sofa if you like, because the other characteristic of bass sound, and remember we're talking about the mating call of the male kakapo, is that you can't tell where it's coming from. So just imagine, if you will, this male kakapo sitting up here, making all this booming noise, which, if there's a female out there, and if she likes the sound, which there probably isn't, and if she likes the sound of this booming, which she probably doesn't, then she can't find the person who's making it. But supposing she does, supposing she's out there, which she probably isn't, she likes the sound of this booming, which she probably doesn't, supposing she can find him, which she probably can't, she will then only consent to mate if the podocarp tree is in fruit. Now, we've all had relationships like that. But supposing they get through all those obstacles, supposing she manages to find him, she will then lay one egg every 2 or 3 years, which will promptly get eaten by a stoat or a rat. And you think, well, so far from sort of trying to sort of save them and conserve them, how on earth has it managed to survive for this long? And the answer is terribly interesting, which is this. It seems like absurd behavior to us, but it's only because its environment has changed in one particular and dramatic way that is completely invisible to us. And its behavior is perfectly attuned to the environment it developed in and completely out of tune with the environment it now finds itself in. Because in an environment where nothing is trying to predate you, you don't want to reproduce too fast. And it turns out you can actually sort of graph this in a computer. That if you take a given reproduction rate and you take the ability of any given environment to sustain any particular level of population, and you start, say, with a fairly low reproduction rate, and you just plot it over several generations, and you'll find the population goes up and up and up and then sort of steadies out and achieves a nice plateau. Tweak the reproduction rate up a bit, and it goes up a little bit higher, and then maybe settles down and levels out. Tweak the reproduction rate a little bit higher yet, and it goes up, and it goes too high, and it drops down, goes too low, goes up too high, and settles into an oscillating sine wave. Tweak it a bit more, and it starts to oscillate between 4 different values. Tweak it more and more and more, and you suddenly hit this terribly fashionable condition called chaos, where the population of the animal just swings wildly from one year to another, and will just hit 0 at one point just out of the sheer mathematics of the situation. And once you've hit 0, there's kind of no coming back. And so, because nature tends to be very parsimonious and is not going to expend energy and resources on something for which there is no return, so the reproduction rate of an animal in an environment with no predators will tune itself to an appropriate level of reproduction. Now, if there's nothing trying to eat you particularly, then that reproduction rate will be very low. And that is the rate at which the kakapo used to reproduce and continues to reproduce despite the fact that it's been predated, because it doesn't know any better, because nothing has managed to teach it anything different along the way. Because the change that occurred happened so suddenly that there was no kind of slope. There was no slope of gradual evolutionary pressure, which is the thing that tends to bring about change. If you have a sudden dramatic change, then there's no direction to go, and you just have disaster. So, again, if I can anthropomorphize for a moment, what seems to have happened is that the animal suddenly reaching a crisis in its population thinks, well, I better just do what I do fantastically well, do what is my main thing, which is I reproduce really, really slowly. And its population goes down, well, I better really do what I do and reproduce really, 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 really slowly. And it seems absurd to us because we can see a larger picture than they can. But if that is the type of behavior that you've evolved successfully to produce, then to do anything else would be against kakapo nature, would be an in-kakapo thing to do. And it has nothing to teach it any other than to just do what it's always done to follow its successful strategy. And because times have changed around it, it's no longer a successful strategy, and the animal is in terrible trouble.